I was telling her that I was like avoiding something, and then she's like, maybe we can reframe this to, you just need a lot of support right now. Like like right now you're doing something that you've never done before. You're taking a huge leap. This is probably the most unstable time in your life.
Yeah.
So you're doing things that used to be like you've done this before, like that is comforting for you. So when it was reframed to me like that, I was like, I just need more support right now.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Souls Work Podcast, the show about uncovering our authentic selves to doing both the light work and the shadow work. I am your host, Janice Ho, and I am back here with my friend and classmate, Janna Estrada. How are you, Janna? Welcome back.
I'm good. I think by the third time, I'm kind of just like...
We've had to re-record this, now 3 times because Riverside has kept kicking us out. But yes, we're here. It's going to happen this time. 3rd time's a charm. All right. So I'm super excited for this conversation because as some of y'all who have been around on the YouTube channel, we were doing an episode on my alcohol-free journey, but Janna was more like guiding that conversation, asking questions. And today the tables are turned and Janna's the one in the hot seat. I mean, we're going to be gentle with her, but today we're really going to learn about her story, about coming into her own authenticity, leaving her, day job to plunge into the world of business, and all of the things that had to happen internally to make that possible, because that is a very scary thing to do. And there was a whole process around that, as I understand. So I'm really excited to dive into it. Before we do that, would you like to introduce yourself one more time? Whatever you would like people to know about you today.
Okay. So my name is Janna. I'm 28. I am business owner of Janna Bakes and also a psychotherapy student and classmate of Janice. Yeah, I think that's it.
Wow, there's a lot in there. Yeah, and I'm really excited to talk about authenticity today as something that is really important for you, because that is what my podcast is about, really. And but everybody has their own journey with that, their own story, their own process of how they come to uncover more of their authentic selves. And I know for you, you've been on your own kind of road of coming into your own self, finding out who you really are, what do you like, how do you want to live your life, and the ways that that has translated into running your business, but also just being comfortable with who you are, like in the world at large, right? And before we get into like the how and your process, I'm curious to know, like, what was the Janna before that, and obviously it's an ongoing thing, not like a before and after per se, but like, how did you experience yourself and life before you really started going through this process of yours and experiencing the kind of shifts that you have more recently?
So before I started my healing journey, I was very unaware of myself. So just going through the motions and very unaware of how to I didn't really have any toolbox for my emotions, or even I didn't even know how to name it. So when the big ones came up, or like the really deep rooted traumas and triggers would come up, I would just do my basic like defense mechanisms or my coping mechanisms, I would say. So
And what do you mind sharing what some of those are? And in Gestalt, we call them creative adjustments.
sorry,
And
yes.
no, that's okay. I often call them protective mechanisms as well, or protective adaptations to trauma, protector parts. There's all these different terms, but they are like the ways that we learn to cope and to protect ourselves when we go through traumatic experiences, and we just don't have the supports we need in that moment to work through it in a more, quote unquote, healthy way, or that's supportive for us. So what were some of the ways that you learned to protect yourself?
So some ways was, if I get really stressed, I tend to go into like a freeze state. And then that would mean like kind of like crawling up into bed, going onto TikTok, and sometimes TikTok or whatever social media, it would be like up to like an hour to 4 hours. one of the rituals that I had at the end of the day, like in university, was getting high and eating takeout. So that was very like comforting to me. And like, yeah, there was like some good ones. Like if I get really stressed out, I'll journal. That one was always a good habit that I had.
Right.
But the ones that really took over my life were the unhealthy ones, like very unsustainable ones. So it was definitely hard.
And what were some of the ways that you like maybe saw yourself? Like, how would you have described yourself as a person back then?
I think very anxious. I
Mm,
cared a lot about what other people thought because that's how I was programmed growing up. I actually had waves of
mm,
how I viewed myself. So, like, waves of like feeling like really good, like a couple years, and then feeling like very like socially awkward, and then like back at again. And then it's actually, it's funny to see the pattern and kind of like
mm,
also the connections of what I did to like reach those highs and lows.
right.
Um, but yeah, I was definitely swept up by um, those waves, and I didn't know
Mm,
why those waves were happening. Like when it was good, but when it was like low, it was kind of like very insecure. Yeah, very
yeah.
dependent on what other people thought of me for me to feel good. And so
Yeah.
just like that in itself, it's very hard to navigate life when it's not
Totally.
coming from yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, bringing it to authenticity, and then how did that sort of block you from really experiencing your authentic self? Like, did you have a sense of like, oh, I don't want to live this way because I really want to be like this, or I really want to express myself in these ways, or I really want to go out and do these things that feel very authentic to me, but I don't feel I can because of that insecurity or fearing what people would think? Did you have a sense of that at the time?
Yes, I did have thoughts of like, I really wish I could just be honest right now. Like, I really wish that
Yeah.
I can say this. Like, I have that, what do we call it in class? Retroflexion? Like, lots and lots of retroflexion. Like, I have this urge to say something,
Mm,
but I'll notice, or like, I'll imagine, like, kind of like a stop, and then
mm,
I won't say it because then I'll start thinking of like, oh, what if this happens and this happens, blah 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 blah. So
yeah.
yeah, it really stopped me from being authentic, and it didn't really hit me until I started my healing journey.
Mm. Yeah, and
Mm.
what was the catalyst for that? I mean, I'm sure there were so many moments leading up to it, but was there a sort of a more immediate trigger that compelled you to really pause and take a look at your life and begin the
Yeah.
journey?
Yeah,
What
it
happened,
was
Janna?
it was a breakup.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that'll do it.
you know how like breakups create bodybuilders, like that's like a
I
that's like a
never
saying.
heard that
Oh really?
before, but
Yeah,
I
I
love
grew up
that.
hearing that in university. Yeah, but
Okay. Hmm.
breakup created emotionally intelligent human being. No, I
I
don't know if
love
I
it.
am, but I'm trying to build to that. um
Hmm.
yeah, it was a really bad breakup. it was it was because it was a relationship that I thought was going to be like my last and like gonna be
Mm,
the one that I was just
yeah.
gonna like stick it through. And not really having the tools to navigate myself in that relationship made it really hard to connect
Mm,
authentically. So closer to the end, it was just so many like floods of like reflection, and just that's when I started really journaling again. And
mm,
just it was just hitting all of the deep rooted like feelings of rejection, abandonment, and like
mm,
not realizing I wasn't being authentic for like how many, like 4 years maybe. I was like for like the first few, but then as I was going through things, like I was kind of felt like I was losing myself.
mm,
So yeah, that breakup, and we can get more into it if you want to of like what
mm.
happened, but
Yeah.
it was kind of just like, do I want to like stay in this state, or am I going to do something to really understand what's happening and really learn how to deal with it?
It sounds like you became more self-aware then. Like you talked about before, you weren't as self-aware, and then something happened in that process where you're starting to make more connections of like, oh, these things that are happening to me in this relationship, these patterns and the ways that I'm feeling, there's something deeper here that is related to maybe, you know, my past traumas or things like that. Was that
Hmm.
your process?
Yes. So it's actually funny, like when you said I was unaware first and then I became aware, I had
Mm,
like memories like pop up of me not being aware. So it started, so at the beginning of the relationship, I was feeling very myself. Like I was feeling like I could be authentic
yeah.
without being aware, but like just being very outgoing and kind of just doing what I wanted. Um, which isn't, like when you're unaware and you're kind of doing whatever you want is not really the best combination. We can also get into that, but yeah. So as we continued dating, I was starting to go through kind of very, not life changes, but like a lot of things with friends, and I think I'm a very social person. Like I love connecting with people. So when I started losing friends and realizing the people that I was around wasn't really the best for me or wasn't the best situation for me, um, I kind of started like spiraling down and not really knowing like who my authentic self was
Yeah.
and who was authentic around me.
Mhm.
Um, and so it just caused a lot of doubt, and like my confidence kind of just like plummeted because I was no longer like leaving the house anymore, and I was
Mm,
kind of just keeping to myself. So um, yeah, that really caused a lot of big emotions to come out of me. And as the big emotions came, and I isolated myself more, I was mostly just seeing my ex from a day-to-day basis, and I don't think he had the tools to really know how to handle like all of the
right.
emotions that I was going through. And I
Yeah.
kind of also felt bad because I was I also have this thing where I had this thing where I
Mm,
dumped on people, so I would just
mm,
like complain and just emotionally dump everything onto him, and like obviously that's a lot for one person to
mm,
deal with. So that, in a sense, like me feeling like I was like a burden as well, and felt also unsupported, but I don't think in a bad way on his part. Like it's just kind of like we're young.
mm.
Who really knows how
Right,
to
yeah.
deal
Right.
with those emotions? Like I definitely didn't. So
Yeah.
that was like a decline for years. And then as I slowly like started coming out of my shell again, like after university,
Mm,
um, then I kind of felt okay, but there was still like those anxious, like I was so anxious all the time. Like I could not just relax and fully just sit there and connect with somebody. There was always like running thoughts in the background, and I still didn't really know how to, because there was this whole stigma back in the day that therapy was, like something has to be really really wrong for you to go to therapy. So like I just
mm,
refused to go to therapy for so long.
mm, mhm,
Yeah. And then once the breakup happened and I was kind of like I didn't really feel like I could authentically connect with anybody during this
mhm,
time. And then when this breakup happened and I started losing friends again, I
mm,
realized I'm like who is really, like who do I feel most comfortable with? Like who can I
mm,
actually show up with?
mm,
And am I even trying to really show up? And that was like a
mm.
huge question. So
Ooh,
um
yeah.
yeah, so when and the breakup
Can I
was
ask what the
just,
answer was?
oh, who was,
Can I ask what the answer was when you were reflecting on that? Like, was there anyone you could think of that you could show up with, and whether you were, yeah, allowing that?
yes, so I had my friends. So I have my girl group of friends who we've been friends since, some of us grade 7 and then some of us in high school. So it's been, I think, almost like 20 years of our
Mm,
friendship. So they have been a very strong rock in my life.
mm,
And like till this day, like we're still supporting each other, and like they come to all my markets and stuff. And
mm,
yeah,
mm.
and it shows me, it really shows me that like, oh, this is what friendship is supposed to be like. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then you could kind of see from that example, like the other people in your life, it's like, oh, no, I don't feel that way with them. So what's going on here?
Yeah. And it's funny because, oh, and my sister as well. And I was going to say it's
Mm,
funny because like my family is not like that. Like it's very unstable and like not a
mm-hmm.
good connection with family, and I feel like that's the
Okay.
first place where you feel stability and like security in like groups of
Right.
people. So
Yeah.
yeah, being able to have that with my friends and my sister really showed, was like a really big support. Like I really leaned on them at the time. But now that I'm
Yeah.
thinking about it, at that time I was actually, I don't think I was the closest to them because we have ebbs and flows of closeness. So at that time, I didn't feel comfortable to like really reach out to them at that time. So I depended
Mm.
on my other girl group. Well, we can get into that later. um,
Yeah.
the tea.
Well,
But yeah,
I'm also
friends.
curious about
Yeah,
this. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, yeah, friends. Friends was a big thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'm curious about this other question that you had for yourself, which was like, am I actually allowing for my authenticity to show up, for people to be with that? Or, so is it correct that that was then the catalyst for going to therapy, to do more of that internal piece for yourself of how can I show up differently? How can I sort of take agency? Yeah.
Yeah,
So what happened there?
exactly. Um, so yeah, I wasn't allowing myself to really show up authentically, and I had a sense of that because of when I would try to, um, because like I know back in the day, like back in university, like I could just show up without any
Mm,
anxiety and just kind of like just
yeah.
talk about whatever with people, and I thought that I was really good at it back in the day. So when I started seeing the shift of like me hesitating to say something, or me
Mm,
getting all these anxious thoughts of if they would like me or not, if I talked
mhm,
to them or if I went deeper, I knew
mhm,
that something was off, and like I couldn't come out of my shell.
mm.
Um, so yeah, that's what pushed me in therapy, because when the breakup happened, I didn't go to my friends immediately. I signed up straight for therapy. Like, yeah,
Wow.
I wanted to process this with somebody who was trained, because with friends, like friends are very supportive, but there's also a lot of like their own stuff coming into it. So I really wanted to
For sure.
hear my voice first and like learn how to process in my own way first before I
Mm,
got other people's input. So yeah,
yeah.
I really tried to um, focus in on that. So yeah.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
That's like, that feels like it was coming from your authentic self. Like you kind of had that wisdom of knowing that that was like the step you had to take. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, if you want to talk a little bit about that therapy, I know you mentioned in another podcast interview you did recently that you took a year off from kind of everything, and you were really focusing on this internal work, going to therapy. What was that like for you that year? And what did you learn? Was it hard? Probably, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it was hard. It was very awkward
Mm,
at first because I initially tried BetterHelp. Um, like I tried to do a chat for like a week, and I just
mm,
felt like I couldn't do it. I was just like, okay, after a week, I was like, no, I can't. And all that belief that like therapy won't help me, and therapy is for
mm,
people who really, 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 really need therapy and stuff like that. Like there was something bad connected to it.
Mhm.
But I really had to like deal with that as I was going, as I was
Mhm.
finally like really like committing to it, and kind of just learning how to open up and like understand, like building that trust with her that she's not gonna judge me on
Mm.
like how I'm thinking about things. Like I'm here to learn. So there's a lot of beliefs that I had to unwrap with her, or like really had to like be aware of as I was talking to her. And it's funny because those things are things you would bring up in therapy, but for like a long time I didn't bring up those like worries and
Mm.
those thoughts with her. So it was definitely like that in itself was hard. And then um doing the uh exercises that she would give me, like
Yeah.
learning how to like learning about boundaries. Like I actually didn't know what boundaries and values even meant.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, really taking a deep dive into that. And like I was on self-help TikTok, so there was a lot of activities as well that I like journal prompts that I would do as well.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
yeah, the first year was very like full of anxious feelings and like, oh, is my
Mm.
therapist gonna judge me? am i am I doing this right?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
not knowing where it was gonna go, not knowing if I was
Mm.
ever gonna be healed or really
Yeah.
on the path. So
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah. I really resonate with that too. And I'm curious if you had a similar experience where I found it to be both like relieving because it was when I was first learning about trauma psychoeducation and really understanding where a lot of my patterns came from. Like really putting sort like we were talking about the alcohol thing, understanding it so that something that seemed very irrational to me actually made a lot of sense. And there was like a lot of
Mhm.
relief from that, from the shame. And also like it was so fucking confronting. Like it was so hard to like have to look at myself in the face and be like, actually I've been perpetuating a lot of my own kind of relationship issues and patterns and my
Yeah.
own aloneness and things like that. And I was like, fuck, like just was, I think, a lot to take in. And there was also this freeing piece as well. I'm curious if you had a similar experience.
Yeah, so when the when I would kind of have like a aha moment of patterns that I was doing, there was a lot of shame that came with it as well,
Yeah.
because it's like,
Mm.
ugh, like why am I doing that kind of thing. But then once, as we started like going through it and really getting deep into it, that was where the relief was from, because it's like,
Mm.
oh, there's nothing really like there's nothing wrong with me. This is just how I've been for 20 26 years. And just
Yeah.
remembering that that's 26 years of programming,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to take some time to unravel. So that kind of put me in the mindset that it's going to take time, it's going to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
um and yeah, the whole like reparenting yourself in
Yeah.
your 20s, like nobody, I never knew this was a thing, but it's like the
I
freaking
know.
hardest thing, because you are basically trying to be the parent that you never had, and trying to like talk to
Right.
yourself with that kindness that I definitely did not have. So
Mm.
yeah, just learning all these new habits and like new ways of talking to yourself and viewing the world is like
Mm. Mm-hmm.
huge. Like it's a huge
Yeah.
thing to do, a lot of work.
Is that one of your main processes now, that you learned, that the whole like being the kind, compassionate parent to yourself, having that conversation with like whatever child part might be coming up for you? Like, is that something you do pretty regularly?
Yes, yeah. So
Yeah.
um yeah, I like to like write letters to myself.
Mm,
Yeah, like I
yeah.
have like a bunch of letters like on my wall, and if the moment
Um,
comes, like I'll
yeah.
like I'll write a letter for if you feel stress, and then I'll like read it, and then that's how I talk to myself, kind of
Uh,
like in an encouraging way, in a way that
mm,
kind of like you talk to like a little kid. And like,
Would you be open to sharing like an example of something you might say in that moment to your child self?
yeah, so one thing that I would write or I have written is like, I know you're really stressed right now, but
Mm-hmm.
you're doing the work, and it's not going to be easy, but you know from experience that you always like you're resilient, you like come back from it every single time. And then I always make sure that I say like I love you at the end of it.
Yes.
Yeah, I've
Oh
done
my
that in class too.
God.
Like
Oh
I've made
yeah.
sure that I've like written like not just everyone else in
Yeah.
the class, but I written myself wrote, wrote myself a letter as well. Yeah,
Mm-mm-mm.
so
I love that. That's so sweet. And yeah, like a lot of the way that I'm hearing you talk to your child self, like that is something like I would love to hear from a parent if I'm feeling stressed or whatever, right? Like that's so comforting. It's both like it's not doing the whole spiritual bypassing shit where it's just like be strong, you're gonna be fine, like whatever. It is really like acknowledging how you feel and like yeah, like I totally get it. And also like kind of encouraging them in that sort of like very grounded adult secure way that it's like you got this and I'm here with you and I got this with you too. Like I fucking love that.
oh my god, if I heard that as a child, how different,
Oh
right?
no.
Like, how different would I be?
I
Who
know.
knows? But yeah,
Yeah.
that emotional support, especially coming from Asian
Mm,
families, oh, it was not there.
right.
It was not there. Like, it
Right.
was the basic
Yeah.
needs. Um,
Totally. Yeah.
yeah. So like when I see friends with families that are like very close, like my boyfriend's
Mm,
family, like they're very close, and like that's like a solid
mm,
foundation for him, and like seeing how he is
yeah.
now, I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Just imagine like having that
Mm.
security growing up. So
Oh, I know. When I'm talking to my child self in very similar ways like that, I do marvel at it. I think like, and I imagine for me, it's more of a visualization. I imagine like I'm holding her, like she's like my little kid on like sitting on my lap and I'm holding her and I'm saying these things to her. And I do think sometimes of like, wow, like what would it be like to have that experience? Because it feels so fucking nice right now. You know what I mean?
right,
Like,
yeah,
yeah, so I get that.
yeah.
And then I'm also thinking about going back to the creative adjustment piece, and you've been sort of alluding to this like throughout, where, some of the reasons around why you didn't have that support, right? Culture, family, the ways that, our parents maybe didn't receive that on their end. And so they didn't know how to give it.
Hmm.
Maybe more of a focus on the material needs. And I don't know what it was like for your parents, but for mine, it was like the immigrant family working to survive, like all of that. But there was that component missing for me that I really needed. And so, in the absence of that support, we learned that it's like we had to find our own ways to like creatively adjust to it. And then when we come into like maybe our healing journey where we now find the support that we need, where that creative adjustment can kind of like go a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm curious to know. I'm hearing therapy was probably a big one for you. Were there any other supports that were really have been very instrumental for you in kind of allowing yourself to shift from those like protective coping mechanisms um, that you've kind of been playing out for your whole life, aside from therapy?
mm, I feel like a lot of it came from me just actively trying different things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So like I'm like trying to think of when the shift started really happening, because
Mm-hmm.
like therapy started it, or the breakup started it, and then therapy was like helping me through it. And then I think just meeting people and like talking about this, and like listening to more podcasts about the things that I was going through, and like really learning, like really
Mm-hmm.
putting the effort to learn
Yeah.
um, what was going on with me. Um, that was probably also one of the biggest things. So like like I said, I was on self-help TikTok, and like
Yeah.
very careful of what, actually probably not really careful of what I listen to, but the journaling prompts definitely helped the most, because even if it wasn't credible, like I wasn't going to like self-diagnose myself or anything like that, but it
Yeah.
was kind of like, how did that, whatever this person on TikTok, how did that make me feel and what is coming up, and then I'll journal about it. And then
Right.
from that was a lot of like a lot of things would come up, and then
Mm.
being able to talk about it with people was really nice, because then I could also hear some of the things that they were doing and some of the things that they're
Mm.
feeling, and also knowing that these feelings are normal and everybody else goes through them at one point of their lives. So yeah, and then listening to books, like I have the one book that really like opened up and like started the fire in me was Untamed, and my
Mm.
coworker recommended it to me, and she's also in the program as well. So
Mm.
yeah, and then finally going to school for psychotherapy, because I just wanted to learn more. Like
Right.
not even like psychotherapy is like a fun, like is something that I've always wanted to do as a career path as well, but
Mm.
the learning aspect, like I just wanted to become as emotionally intelligent and to know myself. Like that was my goal. Like I
Mm.
just wanted to know everything about myself. So
Mm.
what a perfect
Mm.
place
Wow.
than our school.
Oh my God, yeah. And I mean, I wish we could dive more into that, but there are confidentiality things where we can't discuss what happens in class. But I think it's fair to say that like so much of what we're learning in our first year is about the self and
Hmm.
really becoming more highly aware of like our creative adjustments and
Yeah.
really, tending to like some of the wounds that are there for us. And so, yeah, it's a pretty amazing experience, and to do it together, with other people who are on the same path. And yeah. And then something that you just said about kind of connecting with other people who were maybe on the same path and learning from them brings me to this other thing that I know you wanted to talk about, which is the importance of surrounding yourself with the right people for you, right? And how before you were around people who hindered you, who maybe didn't really encourage you to be your authentic self, and really like cheered you on and supported you in whatever it was that you wanted to do for yourself, and how that played into your fears about what people would think about you. So I'm curious to know a little bit more of like what that looked like. I mean, you don't have to go into super details if you don't want to, but just what was it like to be around those people, and how did it affect you and your intuition?
So I think with my intuition, it's always been, actually I feel like it's the same version of somebody in my past who just
Mm.
keeps coming up, and that person was
Mm.
very in their own shit, and like would project their fears onto me. So
Right.
as I was looking back, there were so many versions of those people around me. Um, so it makes it very hard to like really say anything, because if you say something
Mm.
and then they like make a comment about like, oh but what about this, or like, oh I would never do that, or blah 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 blah, like
Right.
I don't think anybody would pay $30 for cupcakes. Like that is
Mm.
something that someone that my ex said to me, because and then I realized that it gave me it kind of like fed the fear of like I can't charge what needs to be charged to get
Yeah.
customers. So like that like that really hindered me as well, to like really know
Mm.
what my worth was in business, but that's connected to not knowing my worth as a person as
Right.
well.
Oof.
So
I got chills.
yeah, so having and not knowing my values, so I hung around a lot of like just people, like whoever I could like be friends with,
Yeah.
and that like having not really knowing that and being surrounded by people who may not reflect the values that you want, it's also very
Hmm.
confusing,
Yeah.
because now
Hmm.
it's just kind of like perpetuating. not perpetuating, but like it's just reflecting what's inside that I don't know. And then if I'm getting
Yeah.
feedback of I don't know outside, then it's just like forever I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like a feeling of like just such a lack of clarity there. And
Mm-hmm.
but as you did the work around identifying your values, I'm curious to know what they are for you
Oh,
now that you know, and then how that's been aligning with like the people in your life.
yeah. So I write it down actually.
Uh-huh. Do you want to read
Um,
them?
I just don't know where they are right now. Let me search it
Well,
on my
what's
computer.
like
I think this might be the most current one, but like I change it every year, or I reflect and see if it's the same thing. So it's actually funny because this I found this exercise on TikTok, and it's to you get like a
mm,
bunch of cards, you print it out, and then
okay.
it's like a bunch of values, right? And then you put them in three
Mm,
piles. And I made my friends do this too recently, just to like figure out to see just for fun to see what their
nice.
values was. But you have a category of very, very important to me. So it's what you should have your life around, like what your life is really about. And then important to me, it's decision making, critical thinking, and non-judgmental way of living. And then the discard pile. So you
All
just
right.
yeah, you just like shuffle through it, and then
Mm,
you have to narrow it down to your top 10, so 5 in the very important and then 5 in the important. so
okay. So what are the five in the very important
so the
for
5 in
you?
the very important, so the first one is honesty.
Yes, that's mine too.
Yeah. The second one is growth. Should be growing.
Yes, that's mine
Yeah.
too.
3 is integrity, but I think I changed that to something else.
Mm, okay.
4 is authenticity. It's in my top 5.
Yeah. Mm,
And then autonomy. And I
yes.
think I changed it to courage actually. But
Mm-hmm.
courage and
That's a big one for me
autonomy,
too.
yeah, it connects to me because for myself to kind of live the way that I want to live, like that requires a lot of courage. And I think
Courage.
autonomy
Absolutely.
means like what is I don't even know what autonomy
Like,
means.
I guess, well, for me, I think about autonomy as freedom, like having
Mm.
more freedom to be able to do the things that I want to do authentically, right? Versus being more restricted by various things, whether it's a particular work schedule or, just expectations or whatever like that. So, yeah, I do think it takes a lot of courage to break out of the status quo. And a lot of
Mhm.
it is about, going against the grain or what people expect of you.
Mhm. Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And that's why I left my job, because I realized that autonomy was like really important to me. And then
Yeah.
my important to me category, which is like my decision making and critical thinking area, is purpose, self
Mm.
acceptance, self knowledge, my health, and mindfulness.
Oh,
Yeah.
beautiful.
And I think
Beautiful.
like I reflect on this every year because values change like as life changes. So who knows, like maybe
Mm.
if I do have like my own family one day, maybe the value will change to family. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And I did a similar thing too. I podcasted about it in season one. There's maybe 3 episodes that are on my core values and about honesty and like all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have found for me, as I have been more in tune with my values the way that you have, and then seeing how does that align with my relationships, I think I just get faster at sort of making that determination when I meet someone or I'm really contemplating, like, do I want to go deeper with this person, that I'm like, it is like not easy for me to communicate with this person. I think communication is a big one for me.
Mm-hmm.
It is just very unclear for me when I talk to them, and to really be able to ask questions and get straightforward answers. And I know that this is so important to me. Like, it is pretty much a non negotiable. So all right, I know there's all this other great stuff about them and I feel certain ways about them, but it's like, no, no, I gotta stay true to like what I know is going to like be a deal breaker at some point. So may as well just really confront that now. So I'm curious if for you that's been a similar thing where it just gets a lot faster and easier to make those identifications and connections and be like, oh yeah, no, we're not aligned, you know?
Yeah, and that's that exactly that. Like, I am so appreciative,
Mm,
grateful that I took the time to like really figure out what my values was, because it really is the direction of where you go and what you do in life. So
yeah.
exactly that, like before with the friends and like accepting like whoever, it it caused a lot of problems for me. Like it made me go deeper with people that weren't aligned with me and like ended up being, you know, not like our situations ended up being not the best. So,
Mm,
yeah, being able to have that compass paired up with like, learning how to like read your body and like figure out what feels right and like feels right,
yeah.
not what that you think feels right. Um
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's been a very big lifesaver, because now, yeah, like alignment, I can choose what is aligned with me and what isn't. And from doing that, my life has gotten so much better. My life,
Yeah.
yeah, it's amazing to think that now I'm actually listening to my gut and my instincts of like, if
Yeah.
this job or this thing doesn't feel right to me, but this path this person does,
Yeah.
now I know I can just onto the right things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Oh, I love that. And I'm also thinking back to something you said about how you would hang out with these certain people and they would sort of maybe put down your ideas or like not be supportive. And that there was this part of you that became, I guess, maybe insecure or fearful or just like not listening to your own intuition, right? And I often think about how, something I've learned for myself because that's been a huge pattern for me too, is that
Mm.
sometimes I would think about, okay, this is the person I'm in relationship with. It definitely matters what they're bringing into it, right? And if this is their response, then yeah, there's a problem with that for me, right? And also, I think the more that I learn about things like creative adjustments, I think about what is my response to their response, right? I think
Hmm.
part of my fear around speaking up to people in these situations, being in relationship with these types of people, like you said, they keep popping up in your life over and over again until you start to realize what's happening. Same thing for me, was not just about like being fearful or insecure around their response, but it was more about I didn't know how to stand up for myself when that happened. I wasn't, because of my creative adjustments, when that would come up, I wouldn't just like walk away or be assertive and say like, hey, I'm not okay with that, right? And so I think so much of the process of like shifting from the relationship was not just about like the external person and maybe changing out those people or whatever, but it was also about like that internal process of becoming more better with my boundaries or being able to like speak out more, to work through what is this block that made me fearful for so long that I could not say something in response. And I'm curious for you if that feels true for you as well, and that if you did end up identifying like why was it so fearful for you to in those moments really speak up for yourself when you knew that it didn't feel good for them to talk to you like that?
Mm.
What was that like learned thing that we learn happens from like so long ago, usually in childhood, of it's not safe to do that?
Yeah. So, um, childhood,
Yeah.
talking to, you know, um, like not being able to be honest with my parents was definitely
Right.
a big thing. So
Hmm.
when I did muster up the courage to say something, and of course,
Yeah.
like as a child, you say it maybe not in the best way, because I mean, what do you know?
Because
Like,
you're a child.
yeah,
Yeah,
you're a child.
exactly.
It would kind of like come back to me and be like, why are you saying that? Like, why would you say that to me? Oh, you're you're so selfish, you're arrogant. Like,
Mm,
those comments would be thrown at me if I actually spoke up or like
yeah,
stood up for myself. So
right.
it was just a lot of like emotional like bombarding onto me till I caved, and then I'm the one who's apologizing. So
Yes.
so
Oof.
yeah, just imagine
Chills.
from like repeatedly kind of being shut down, and like it's kind of like telling a child like your how you feel doesn't matter. and
Yeah.
and
And even
there's
more than that, if
yeah,
you're being made to apologize, it's like not only does it not matter, but it's wrong. Like the way that you're expressing yourself is not acceptable, and you need to be sorry. And that's same experience for me, which is why I'm getting
yeah,
chills. And oof, yeah,
yeah, like you need to be sorry and you need to tend to me, kind of thing.
yes, yes,
The
yeah.
Asian. No, no, no. but but yeah, so I just
Mm,
learned that other people's emotions were more important than mine, or their experience is more important than mine. And
mm,
so if I say anything, like something bad will happen. And also the feeling of not being able to leave, or like not being able to really do anything about it as well,
yeah,
for many years.
totally.
So
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
yeah, it was very hard to be able
Yeah.
to learn how to speak up for myself. And to be honest, I think this year is the year that, like, in therapy goals is to be completely honest, because
Mm.
I learned how to establish boundaries, but I didn't know how to carry them. Like, I didn't know how to actually.
Right. Oof. Okay, so I
Yeah.
did an episode on boundaries that really speaks, I think, to what you're saying, where it's like you can learn the like, what do boundaries mean? I took a boundaries program because I too did not know shit about boundaries. Like after my breakup, I was like, oh my God, I need to understand what this actually means. And so I think that there's all of this great education out there that people learn. What are boundaries? What are my boundaries? They write it down. They like
Hmm.
learn all these communication scripts that they can, use to like communicate those boundaries and all of the good things that I think are really helpful. But then I also find that a lot of times, and this definitely happened for me, which is when you're actually, like you're saying, seeing it through, having to maintain those boundaries, which I think is the hardest part, is that all of these very deep rooted fears, the creative adjustments that told us you're not allowed to have boundaries, that if you try to express, how you feel, again, there is going to be some sort of like repercussions about that. And so it really made me like realize how much of that internal piece is so necessary as well in doing the boundary thing. It's not just an intellectual thing of knowing like the step by step and the identification of it, but it's also like the deepest part of like, do you even feel like your needs are valid? Do you even
Hmm.
feel like, if you were to say something there, it's safe enough for you to do that, right? Because if that isn't there, then it will just feel like a fucking struggle all the time of like, I know I need to set a boundary, but holy shit, it feels so wrong right now. And it feels so scary right now. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of work on my sort of protector parts and the wounded parts in me that, like you're saying, got put down a lot or reprimanded when it just was wanting to express itself. And
Hmm.
it sounds like you've done a lot of work on sort of talking to your child parts in a very compassionate way. And I'm wondering if that also includes work on the creative adjustment part. Because sometimes I think the creative adjustment part gets a bit of a bad rap. Like, yo, you're fucking up my vibe. You're like blocking my way into just being able to assert my boundaries and all of that. But actually, like, those are oftentimes child parts as well that like have been working really hard and also need a lot of compassion. So I'm curious for you if that's been part of your work too.
Yeah, being very compassionate about those creative adjustments is funny, because my last therapy session, that's something that we really dove deep into, because
Mm,
recently I've been feeling like I've been noticing in myself that I've been binge eating and kind of avoiding and like getting back into the freeze
mhm.
state when I get very stressed. And
Right.
I was telling her that I was like avoiding something And then she's like, maybe we can reframe this to, you just need a lot of support right now. Like like right now you're doing something that you've never done before. You're taking a huge leap. This is probably the most unstable time in your life.
Yeah.
So you're doing things that used to be like you've done this before, like that is comforting for you. So when it was reframed to me like that, I was like, I just need more support right now. So so now when I'm
Do you have
doing
a sense
that,
of what that?
wait, what? Do I have a sense
I
of?
was just gonna ask if you have a sense of what support you do need.
Oh yes, it's connection that I actually need.
Oh,
Yes,
I
I know. No, like because I realized that something that I do when I actually really need support is I like isolate, and then like I crawl into bed,
Yeah.
and then I just like kind of mindlessly scroll and like numb everything out.
Right.
But
If you were to instead shift to like, oh, I'm going to reach out for connection, like what would that look like for you in that moment? That would feel like, what kind of connection would feel supportive for you in that moment?
so it would look like me reaching out to my boyfriend and being like, I'm not feeling the best right now. Like I would really want some like cuddles and like food.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah. Or reaching out to the girlfriends. Like I reached out to them like after my therapy session. I reached out to them and I was like, do you guys want to like hang out and just have like a night in and just surround myself with like people who I love and love me back, and like I can feel like I could be myself around. Yeah. Or just like bothering my sister, like just some sort of connection where I can just be myself and just be really in the moment with them is very supportive to me. And like it's a plus if we can like talk about it as well.
Yeah.
Like I can be very honest about my process, and I think hanging around those people, like my people, it's more likely to happen that I can like talk about it openly, and then I trust that they'll hold it with like love and care. Like they won't like push their own shit onto me. Like they'll actually just listen and be there. So
I love that. I love that. Oh my God. I feel like we could keep going down all the rabbit holes with this. I'm just watching the time. I want to make sure that if there's anything that's left for you that we didn't cover that you want to like share or talk about before we wrap up. Is there anything that feels incomplete?
I think like talking about my breakup is actually something I want to dive deeper into, but I think we can talk about more about that on another one.
Right, on the anxious to secure episode.
About relationships. So
okay.
I realized that I freaking love talking about this stuff. It's so much fun.
Ugh, right?
Yeah.
Right?
It's so much fun.
So I have a whole podcast about it.
I love that. And I love that you're bringing me on.
Yeah.
So
yes, and you are welcome back anytime. And I know we're going to do many more of these, whether we're doing our little process episodes or, come back in a few months and share more about your journey. And yeah, like, absolutely. I love talking to you and very grateful that you're here with me today.
Janna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Janna.
Such a good podcast.
My pleasure.
Such an interviewer.
Thank you. Well, do you want to share where people can find you to connect, to learn more?
You can find me on Janna Bakes. I'm very active on my Instagram, or you can find me on TikTok. And I'm gonna come out with something soon, but I'll drop that on Instagram if you follow me. So yeah.
All right. Go follow, find out what the big news is. And you can follow me on Instagram at Janice Soul Images, as well as at Janice Soul Counseling. We are on Facebook at the Souls Work Podcast. And you can find all the episodes back from season 1 at thesoulsworkpodcast.com. If you are here on YouTube, we started season 4 here. And don't forget to like, subscribe. What's the other thing?
Comment
Comment below. what did you love about this episode, and what would you like to hear about coming up? All right. Thanks again, Janna, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. Until
Thank
next
you.
time. Bye.